Today we're going to be looking at RackNerd. So RackNerd have been getting a lot of attention recently because they have some very aggressively priced VPS servers. Let's check out the prices. They are running a Black Friday sale at the moment. I've got a link in the description if you want to get access to these deals because these are very impressive in terms of their pricing. These are per year prices. So the one I'm going to check out today, $28.55 per year. So that's just about $2, just a little more than $2 a month here. You get 2 CPU cores and 2.5 gigabytes of RAM. I'm going to try this one out, but all of these look like they're pretty solid value. Now you could use these for pretty much whatever you want. They'd make a good web server, make a decent mail server. You could run a media server like Nextcloud on here. What else could you do? It would make a nice VPN or just a backup server because they're quite cheap. So I'm going to try this out as a web server in this setup. So I'm going to show you how to set up Cloudpanel on here, install websites on here. What I'm going to do is put a WordPress website. This is a basic starter template using the Cadence theme. Run some benchmarks on these CPUs and see how they stack up. Given that I've got this WordPress website sitting right here, I'll run it through Google PageSpeed Insight first and show you how it's running. So just running this idea test site through Google PageSpeed Insights. I think this is going to max out because this is a very lightweight website. I think even though this is a budget VPS, it should be able to get a solid score on Google PageSpeed Insight. So there we go. We can max this out. We can get 100 on here, 1.2 second first contentful paint. This is a very basic website. So even though it's a cheap VPS, you can still get a good Google PageSpeed Insight score, provided your website's well optimized and lightweight. So that pretty much answered my question straight away. It can run very solidly for a simple website. In terms of its benchmarking score, I ran it through Geekbench 5 here. So for its single core, it's getting 510, multi-core 975. So it's got 2 cores here. These are Intel Xeon processors, so it's the E5-268. I looked these up. These are 9 or 10 years old, I think, generally. So a little bit old in terms of their actual manufacture date. So I think this is probably where the budget comes into it. They've probably got a good deal on some older hardware and they've been able to offer some very cheap deals. So it's still a 2.8 gigahertz Xeon, so it's still solid. These are pretty close to what you get from something like DigitalOcean, I think. So I had a look at DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is a bit faster with its single core. This is like the standard droplet that you get on DigitalOcean. Because it's only 1 core, I've got 2 cores. So my multi-core score is actually higher using RackNerd. So a little bit better than the standard DigitalOcean droplet using what I've got here on RackNerd. The other one I'd like to compare it with was the Vultr High Frequency that I use quite often as well. So Vultr High Frequency is still considerably quicker here, but you're obviously paying $6 a month, so considerably more expensive, but you're getting that Skylake 3.7 gigahertz CPU. So a significant clock speed increase using something like Vultr. But I mean, the value here on RackNerd is crazy good because it's so much cheaper. And if you don't need to run anything particularly heavy like we showed before, you can run just fine using what you get here on this budget server. I know a lot of you guys like WordPress, so I ran some WordPress specific benchmarks too. So let's have a quick look at these benchmark results. So WP Performance Tester, RackNerd is well faster than the industry average. So 1.2, the industry average is 2.6. So 1.2 is very solid. That's pretty similar to like a good quality shared host like SiteGround will get around that mark, I think. WP WordPress hosting benchmarking tool. This one, you got a 6.1 out of 10. So solid scores, particularly with file systems. So this for a file server for running static web pages, it's going to perform pretty well. The database performance was a little bit down. So that probably is the CPU is a little bit old and not as quick as some recent models, but still pretty solid performance, I think. Like 6.1 out of 10 for that value, I think is still pretty solid. If you actually compare it to Vultr High Frequency, I did this on an earlier video. I'll show you just here. So 7.7 I got on the Vultr Intel High Frequency for comparison. So not that much difference. I mean, there is obviously a jump up to that Vultr High Frequency because it's obviously a much better CPU, but the gap isn't not enormous is really the point I'm trying to get across. So RackNerd, it's certainly not too good to be true. I think this value is really, really solid. I think this is well above industry average for a very low price. So I've been testing this for a few days now, and I might just go through the pros and cons that I've found so far, and then I'll go through the detailed setup for you guys who want to actually get this and set it up as a web server. All right, pros and cons. The obvious pro is that it's outstanding value, so just $2 or $3 a month, depending on what plan you're choosing here. Very solid performance, like we saw. Port 25 is open, so for those of you who want to run a mail server, this is quite important. A lot of places either have Port 25 closed or you have to contact support to make sure they allow you to run port 25. But this was opened by default, so I could run an email server on here straight out of the box just fine. In terms of its cons, like the CPU was a bit older, like we saw. I think that Intel Xeon was a fairly older model, but still performed okay. There was no one-click setup. All the setup that I do had to be done from a terminal. I'll show you about that later, but there was no one-click Plesk installer, no one-click WordPress. You had to actually go into your terminal and install everything from the terminal. So it does require a bit of technical skill, but I'll cover all that later in the video, step by step, so you can follow along. And I've got lots of other tutorials on the channel where I show you how to set up a server from the command line as well. So hit subscribe and check out my other videos for those. The user interface is not the prettiest. I'll show you that in a second. And not all the products are available in all the data centers. So the data centers are all around the world, mostly in the USA. They've got Canada, they've got London, Amsterdam, and Singapore was on there as well. When I was actually setting up mine, I could only choose, I think I could choose the USA ones and Amsterdam. So just check if it's really important that you have a server location in a specific country, but you get to pick this before you buy the account. So don't worry about that. It's when you go through the checkout, you can choose your location. So just make sure you're happy with the location before you go ahead. And like I said earlier, the actual server control panel, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but I have been using things like Oracle, AWS. Those are also equally ugly and confusing. This is actually fairly simple once you've used it once or twice. You can do all the basic things, reboot the server, reinstall the server, change your password, all the things you'd need to do. And for the most part, you don't really need to go in here anyway once it's been set up. So I just thought I'd get that out of the way. But it's not as streamlined as some of the other places I've used recently, like Vultr, DigitalOcean, Cloudways. These look a little better than this one. So I think that pretty much covers the major pros and cons of RackNerd. What I want to do now is give you a full detailed setup experience using RackNerd. So I'm going to set up this web server right in front of you right now. So if you head to that link in the description, you can follow along if you're interested. But let's get started. All right, following the link in the description will take you to RackNerd. Now, at the moment, it's Black Friday, so let's check out the Black Friday deals. We can take a peek here. But if it's not Black Friday when you're watching this video, if you've missed these specials, don't worry, because I'll keep the link in the description updated. I'll keep it updated with the other specials that they run, because they do run other specials during the year similar to this. So don't worry if you miss out. But the most important thing to notice here with this pricing, the pricing is very sharp. These are per year prices. So this is less than $1 a month when you look at it per month. You do have to pay per year, but the prices are extremely good value here. So a little bit more than $1 a month, a little bit more than $2 a month, and a little bit more than $3 a month. But you do need to pay for 1 year at a time. That's a main disadvantage, I guess. But these are pretty cheap. And so you've got 1 CPU core on these ones, 2 CPU cores on these ones. The other things to pay attention to is the SSD storage size and our RAM. So 2.5 gigabytes of RAM. This is the one we're going to be using for today's demonstration. They all have 1 gigabit per second network port. So that's pretty solid. Pretty good speed in terms of its network speed. So anyway, we're going to try this one out. I've actually already got this account set up for myself, but I'll just walk you through the ordering process just so you can see what it's like. So it's a pretty normal shopping cart looking thing here. So we can go ahead. We can configure a few things here though. So pay attention to this. You can choose a location. So they've got some North American locations. We've also got 1 European location in Amsterdam here. So it doesn't really matter what we go with. I think for most people, pick a North American one like New York or Dallas. Operating system, they've got different kinds of Linux. You can actually change this very easily later. I'm going to show you how to do that. But for this demo, I'm going to use Debian 11. I'm going to run Cloudpanel, but there's lots of tutorials on my channel where I run Hestia CP or I run CyberPanel. All of these things will work on here. I'm just going to use Cloudpanel for the demo today just because I feel like it, and let's continue. Now, you won't normally need a promo code. If there is any promo codes, I'll put them in the description, but usually the link will automatically apply the special product discount anyway. So you won't need anything there. We can check out. Then it's just a matter of creating an account, filling in your details here. You can choose your payment method, so PayPal, credit card. They actually accept crypto as well, so Bitcoin, Litecoin. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting little feature there. Got some net banking options as well, which is lots of cool options that you don't normally get, which is worth noting. Agree to the terms of service and complete the order. Okay, so after your order goes through, you'll get an email from RackNerd. That'll give you your root password and also your VM user password. So keep a note of these users and passwords because we're going to use these a little bit later. To log into your account from the main page, you'll see there's a My Account button there. That'll take you to the login screen, and this will allow you to log in using the credentials that you set up when you created your account. And your account area will look basically like this. We can see we've got our 2.5 gigabyte VPS sitting here. We can view the details. And this will give us our product details. So we've got our one product here. This is how much it costs to renew annually. And we can check out the actual server here. All right, so for our 2.5 gigabyte VPS, if we scroll down, we can see we've got reboot options, shutdown options, and our control panel here. Let's check out the control panel. We can click manage there. And from here we can see our server IP address, and we can do a few things like we can reboot, shut down, power off, reinstall with a different operating system. We can try different setups and things, test different ideas with fresh reinstalls. You can actually change your root password here as well. So a few essential little things here that we can work with. But if you've just freshly signed up, you can just use that IP address and connect by SSH. Use the password that we got here with root and your root password and log into your terminal. So what I'll do, I'll reinstall my server and I'll show you what a fresh setup process looks like, connecting with SSH, installing the panel and setting up a website. So I'll do all this in this video. So we can choose our operating system. So they've got Alma Linux, CentOS, Debian, Fedora, Rocky, and Ubuntu. So all our favorite versions of Linux, basically. And for this one, I'm going to use Debian 11. I've noticed this gives pretty good performance when I'm running Cloudpanel. So let's use this one for this example, and let's reinstall. Click yes for confirm, and it'll take about 10 minutes for this to complete. Just note that this does reset the root password. When you reinstall the server, you'll get a new root password. So copy that, keep that safe because we're going to need that to log in to SSH a little bit later. So anyway, let's come back after 10 minutes and let's do this install. All right, so fast forward 10 minutes, we are ready to connect to this IP address. You can also get the IP address in your product details here. They'll show you the primary IP. Either way, grab your IP address, and we're going to use an SSH connection to connect to our server. So on Windows, I like to use PuTTY for SSH. On Mac, you can use your terminal, whatever you like, whatever software, but PuTTY on Windows is my choice. You can get that for free on putty.org. Okay, so I've loaded up PuTTY here. We're going to put that IP address in there for the host name, and we're going to put root at, and we're on port 22 by default there, and we're going to save this as rack demo. There we go. Save that in. Looks good. We can open that up, and we're going to be prompted for our password. That is going to be the password that we use when we reset the server. Alternatively, if you haven't reset the server, if you're starting from fresh, you can get that root password from your email, but either way. So I've just copied that password, and I can right-click in PuTTY to paste it in and press enter. You won't see the password, it'll be hidden, but right-click and paste it in, right-click to paste it and press enter, and then we will be logged in as root here. So from here, you're free to install anything. You can put Cloudpanel on like I'm doing today, but you can put Hestia or Cyberpanel or WordOps or Webinarly. Anything you want can be done from this point here. But for this example, let's do Cloudpanel. So from my Cloudpanel tutorial, I do a server update here. So let's run the updates. Again, I just paste in with the right click there, the update commands here. We're going to let this run. We might get prompted for some confirmations on dialog boxes here during the update. So just press enter if any of those pop up. I'll wait and see if we get any for this one. And like I said, we've got a dialog box here. We just press enter for OK there. Let it keep running. We are nearly done. And I will put a link in the description with these commands to my blog for this tutorial, so you can just follow along by copying and pasting. It'll be pretty simple to do. So our updates are all done. Now we can actually install Cloudpanel. So I'm going to run this command here. So let's copy that one out. Again, we right click, paste that command in there and press enter. And let it do its thing. All right, so that's all complete. That took about 10 minutes. We can actually highlight this, and that'll automatically copy it from PuTTY into our clipboard. We can paste that. We can visit our Cloudpanel on our IP address on port 8443. But before we do that, it's good to reboot after we did all those updates and installed that stuff. So let's do a full reboot here. And this will take 2 or 3 minutes. And once that server comes back alive, we can log into our panel. While we are waiting for that to reboot, we can actually point a domain name over to this IP, so we can use a domain name on here later. So I've got a domain over on Namecheap, Idea Test site. So I'm logged in under my domain list under Advanced DNS on my Idea Test site. We're going to add some DNS records here. So let's add a record for the IP address, and we're going to put host at, and just tick that on there. And we're going to do the same thing with... We can choose something for our panel. So I'm going to call it Cloudpanel. So CP subdomains pointing to our IP address. Let's set that one up. And what else can we do? Let's do a record for www as well, pointing that to the IP address. So that should be enough to get us started. Hopefully our server has rebooted. We can access that server. Was it 8443? IP address on port 8443. See if we can connect here. And then we just have to set up our Cloudpanel with an account name. So we just fill this out. So set that up. Pay attention to your username and password because we're going to use that in a minute. Let's go ahead and create the user. So we can log in with that user and password that we just created there and then log in. So here we are on Cloudpanel. Now we can go ahead and start adding websites. But the first thing I'd like to do is change this address and put my custom domain on there. So admin area under settings, we've got custom domain for Cloudpanel. So we'll put in our custom domain here. I'm going to use idea test site and I put CP on here for my subdomain. You'll notice I did that earlier on Namecheap's DNS. So whatever you've chosen there will go in there and save that on. It will issue a Let's Encrypt SSL certificate so we can access our panel securely through that domain. And it does take a little while when you issue a new Let's Encrypt certificate, so just be patient and come back in a minute while we wait for this new domain to start working. So if we try that straight away, it may not work. Yeah, so we'll get the SSL warning. I found sometimes if we restart Chrome, that can actually speed it up. So let's try restarting Chrome. Okay, so it took about a minute. I restarted Chrome and here we are. We've got our SSL padlock here. We can log in. I set up it as idea spot and our password. So these were the Cloudpanel account creation credentials here. We can log in. Now we can log back in. Sweet, let's add a site. Let's do a WordPress site for this demo. We can fill in this info here. All right, so we just fill that out. Again, pay attention to the user and the password. We're going to use those again a little bit later to log into WordPress. So allow it to create and just be patient there. All right, so Cloudpanel is going to generate some credentials here. We want to copy all of these because we've got a site password, a database password, and our WordPress password. So copy all of those and keep those safe. I've just popped them into a notepad here, so I'll just save that in. Okay, now let's head back to our sites and let's manage this one. So we can actually see here, we've got SSL here. By default, we've got a self-signed certificate. We want to change that to a Let's Encrypt certificate. So let's do new Let's Encrypt certificate. Make sure you've got your DNS records pointed already. So I like to use a tool like dnschecker.org to just test my domain name before I try to issue any certificates. I should have mentioned this when I was doing the actual panel certificate, but always just check your domain to make sure it's hitting the IP address all around the world successfully, just to make sure the certificate gets issued correctly. So go ahead, create and install here. This will take a minute. Yeah, usually this doesn't take very long, like 15 minutes for this to actually propagate around the world sufficiently for the certificate to issue properly. But some DNS providers, if you're not using Namecheap, if you're using something else, maybe it takes longer, but in most cases, it doesn't take very long. But it looks like we've got our Let's Encrypt certificate installed. Okay, so it's been a few minutes. Let's see. Idea test site, still not got the SSL. Let's restart Chrome. And restart Chrome. Let's try again. And that looks better. So idea test site with our padlock. Let's go to our WordPress admin panel. So WP-admin here. So WP admin, enter. That'll take us to our WordPress login, and hopefully you saved your passwords when we set up this website, because we're going to use that WordPress password that we got earlier from Cloudpanel. That's the one. And IdeaSpot is our username. Let's log in. Should be all good. There we go. Awesome. So here you can import a WordPress website or set up a theme and start building a website, whatever you like. But in this case, I just used Cadence theme, a starter template site, to do our testing. So that was under appearance and themes. I think when you add new, we can see popular themes. Cadence should be pretty popular. Yeah, that's the one we used for our demo here. So let's just install that one. But you get the idea. If you'd like a full Cadence tutorial, I've done a really detailed one. I've done several on the channel as well. So I'm just going to set up a Cadence starter template, but check those out if you haven't already. I think Cadence and Astra are probably the best free themes at the moment for WordPress. So we can actually look at the Cadence starter templates that are free only here. So there's one called Agency that I quite like. You can choose colors and things. Let's import the full site and go ahead. Skip and start importing. But anyway, this is how it's done. I'm going to skip ahead and let's do the benchmarks and things. And the benchmarks I ran on this were from plugins. We add new. And if we search for benchmark, we can actually see there's a couple here that I like. This one by Anton Alexandrov and the one by Kevin Ohashi here, WP Performance Tester. So these two give us pretty valuable benchmarks. The other one was that one here. Activate that one. Awesome. One other little thing I noticed just as I thought I was almost finished the tutorial is that our host name by default on RackNerd is vpsserver.com. We can very easily change that. You just have to log into your terminal on PuTTY. We can type host name. In my case, it's idea test.site, and that'll change it there. So if I type host name now, it's idea test site. If I reload here, we can see our host name is updated. So that looks all good now. So that's the basics of our RackNerd setup. We set up WordPress on RackNerd, fairly simple to do. We did Cloudpanel for this demonstration. The other thing you could do is combine Cloudpanel with Cloudflare. So combining those gives you extra free CDN, extra security from Cloudflare. So maybe check that video out. I used Oracle as our VPS in this video, but you can use this with RackNerd or anything really. Same steps basically. There's other things you can use, like I mentioned as well. CyberPanel would work here, Hestia would work here, Webinarly, AA Panel, WordOps, any of those would be okay. So check out the other tutorials, hit subscribe and come back and watch them anytime you want. But basically, this would be the one I'll check out next time. So I might put that up on the end screen. But anyway, RackNerd, great value, very surprisingly good performance for that very low price. So check that link in the description and check out RackNerd if you're interested in getting a good value VPS. But thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.